For the past 2 years, my weekends have been ruined, and I can't remember the last time I woke up on a Saturday morning without a feeling of irritation, without the feeling that I am not the mistress of my own home, but a servant in someone else's, newly inhabited space, where every movement is subject to inspection, every word is secretly analyzed, and even the air seems saturated with other people's expectations and assessments, leaving me with no sense of comfort or peace. Every Friday night, as if on an inexorable, almost manic schedule, Durant's parents would appear on our doorstep with tightly zipped bags, as if they were returning not for a weekend but from a protracted expedition, and they would cross the threshold with such confidence, with such impatient tact as they placed their bags of food on the kitchen counter, kicked off their shoes and nodded towards the living room, that I had an almost hallucinatory feeling, as if I had come to them myself, as if I needed to ask permission for a cup of tea or to stand by the window. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy. This was not a friendly visit. It was not even a formality behind which respect for our space with Durant could be hidden. It was an obsessive ritual, peremptory and one-sided. They didn't call ahead, didn't ask if it was convenient, didn't inquire about our weekend plans, didn't offer compromises. They just showed up, like something to be endured, like seasonal rain or Friday night traffic. And with each passing week, this ritual became more subtle in its brutality. First they came at 9, then at 8, then they started showing up around 7, and finally, which was completely unbearable, they started showing up on Thursdays, citing Durant's late work, as if his absence justified their presence. They brought food that only they thought was good, brought their own pillows and even their own towels, as if this were a hotel and not our home. "We'll stay and make sure everything is okay," they repeated, with the same intonation with which martial law is reported on the news, without anyone ever explaining what exactly they considered okay. Maybe the way I chopped my vegetables made them anxious. Or was it the clutter under the sink that scared them? I didn't know. At first, I was naive, thinking it was temporary. Maybe they were going through a crisis. Maybe they were lonely. Maybe they were just going through a phase. But as the weeks went by, the months turned into seasons. Their visits only grew more insistent, as if our home was where they got their meaning. I tried to talk to Durant, looking for understanding in his eyes, but he sighed every time, put his arm around my shoulders, and said the same thing over and over, just let it happen. He, who had grown up with them, accepted this behavior as normal, didn't see it as an intrusion, didn't feel pressured, didn't feel my life shrinking to the corner of the couch where I could retreat while his parents took up all the other space. I tried to fight it. I told him we had plans. I would hint that we were tired, that I had a cold, that I needed some time alone, and even, in a desperate attempt, fake a cough, hoping that fear of germs would repel them like demon incense. But nothing worked. They would say, "Oh, we'll come with you," or worse, "We'll stay here and make sure everything is okay." And "okay" sounded like a death sentence. They were not helpful guests. They didn't help, they didn't clean, they didn't ask if they needed help, they only criticized. Perlita, my mother-in-law, liked to walk slowly through the kitchen, stop at the sink, tilt her head, and say, "I don't know why you use those pots. You have the ones I gave you. And you really should organize your pantry better." And all this was said in a tone that bordered on sympathy and blame, and the smile never reached the eyes. Nestor, my father-in-law, generally turned the living room into his territory. He would commandeer the TV like a pirate a ship, turning on sports broadcasts from early morning until late at night, throwing the remote on the sofa, leaving his socks on the table and taking off his shoes right at the entrance, so that I felt like I was living in a warehouse after a game. Their food was always with them. I cooked, set the table, but all this was ignored in favor of some broth containers with meat and strange marinades and soups that smelled like they were prepared with the participation of alchemy. They used my kitchen, leaving a mess behind, as if I were the service staff. And all this happened not because they had nowhere to be. Their house was only 15 minutes away, huge, clean, beautiful, with a spacious veranda and an updated bathroom, which Perlita never tired of telling us about when we, by a strange coincidence only once in these 2 years, visited them. "Brand new tiles," she said proudly. "They cost a fortune, but they were worth it." That's when something clicked in me. They didn't come to us because there was nowhere else to go. They came because they wanted to dominate, to be present, to control, to live someone else's life. And then I thought, if they liked being here so much, who was looking after their house? Wouldn't it be ironic if their beloved fortress, their aesthetic pride, their immaculate retreat, suddenly became less empty on the weekends? And then an idea struck me. I waited until I heard Perlita, without bothering to lower her voice, loud enough for it to echo around the kitchen and reach my ears, tell Durant in her peremptory, proprietary tone, "We'll come next weekend, and the next, and probably every weekend all summer. You know how we like to make sure everything goes smoothly." And this smoothly of hers seemed to reveal the whole meaning of what was happening. Not help, not care, not a desire to be close, but control, supervision, a habit of considering everything around you as your own. I pretended not to hear, nodded, as if I were busy with something else, although inside me this new, sweet thought was already blossoming, like the first bud of a spring flower, still unnoticeable, but promising change. I did not tell anyone about my plans, not Durant, who, as always, would have preferred to simply wait out the storm, as he called any attempt on my part to regain my space, not my friend Claire, who, if she had heard, would certainly have raised a glass to my courage and would have added a few sharp jokes, not even anyone from the family. This was my own little rebellion, carefully calibrated, fragile, but full of determination. I started small. Their house, I knew, kept the key under a false stone to the right of the front door. It was a family secret, passed down from generation to generation, and, most surprisingly, they never saw fit to change its location, because who else but their own could use it? They didn't lock the doors when they left, not out of trust in the outside world, but out of confidence in their own order, in their own system, where everything was predictable and manageable. And so one afternoon, when I knew for sure that Perlita and Nestor were at work, I approached their house, trying to look as inconspicuous as possible, as if I were just strolling through the neighborhood, took the key from under the stone and entered. The house, as always, was impeccable, smelling of lavender and lemon, with neatly laid out pillows, symmetrical paintings, sparkling tabletops and perfectly arranged books on the shelves, as if it were not a place to live, but a prop for an interior design magazine. I took some good shots, the living room with its cream chairs, the kitchen with its perfectly laid tiles, the guest bedroom with its iron sheets, the backyard with its manicured lawn and the barbecue where Nestor loved to stand in his apron and lecture on proper grilling. Nothing too fancy, just enough to show that the place was livable, cozy, safe, and ready to welcome guests. Then I posted an ad. Weekends only. 4-bedroom home in Massapequa. Available Friday through Sunday. Fully furnished, quiet area, perfect for short-term stays. Families welcome. I put it on Craigslist, added it to a couple of local Facebook groups where moms were looking for temporary guest rooms and barbecue lovers were dreaming of a backyard for a few days. It didn't take long, less than 2 days, my inbox was filling up with messages. People were asking if it was rented yet, thanking me for the photos and descriptions. One woman, a very nice, polite person, wanted to rent it every other weekend for her parents, who were visiting from Florida. Another man needed a place to stay while his apartment was being renovated, and he especially commented on how conveniently located the house was. Of course, I didn't charge them any money, yet. All of this was just an opportunity, an open window, a stage for a performance that was supposed to happen. And so, on that very weekend when Perlita was especially confident in her intention to keep an eye on everything all summer, I prepared 2 demonstrations, the first for Saturday afternoon, the second a little later, at 2 o'clock. I sent detailed instructions, saved the route on Google Maps, specified that the meeting place would be our address, and after that they would go to the screening. Everything was calculated. By Friday evening, Perlita and Nestor, as always, showed up with bags, sighing heavily, as if they had accomplished a feat, and with the same expression of confident, anticipatory fatigue with which they entered the house every week. "We are here to keep an eye on everything," Perlita said, like a mantra, like a spell. Durant, without changing his intonation, like an actor who has memorized a role, sighed and muttered, "Just let it happen." But I did not just let it happen. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and, trying to sound as calm as possible, as if this was an insignificant listing, said, "Perfect, because I just put your house up for sale." At first, Perlita's face didn't change one iota, as if her brain had decided to pause and try to process what she'd just heard later, when it was safer. Nestor, on the other hand, immediately frowned, like a man who felt threatened but hadn't yet figured out where or what. "What do you mean you put our house up for sale?" His voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't calm either. I turned the phone around to face them, large, clear photos of their perfectly curated decor, their new bathroom, their beloved backyard with its grill where, according to Nestor, the meat always came out just right. "Weekend rental," I explained. "Since you're never home anyway, I thought I'd help you out." Durant made a strange noise, coughed into his hand, but I felt his shoulders shake next to me as he tried not to laugh. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, our eyes met with equal understanding. Perlita had finally come to her senses. "It's not funny," she said, pressing her lips together as if fighting the urge to scream. "I'm not joking," I said. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, confident and punctual, like everything in my plan. Perlita's head snapped toward the window. There was a couple standing on the porch, a woman with a tablet, a man with a phone, taking pictures of my flower beds as if they were a landmark. Perlita darted toward me. "You told them to come here?" I smiled. "Oh, no. This is just a meeting place. After that, they'll head your way." Nestor groaned, rubbing his forehead. "You gave them our address?" I nodded. "Yeah. I hope you cleaned up." Durant snorted, and even though I was trying to look serious, I couldn't help but smile. Perlita burst into the guest room, and we could hear her frantically unzipping her bags, muttering under her breath either curses or a list of things that urgently needed to be hidden. Nestor stood in the hallway, as if he couldn't decide whether to swear, leave, or just surrender to the mercy of circumstances. That's when it all began, not that it had been calm before, but it was at that moment that the tension that had been building for weeks, like steam in a kettle forgotten on the stove, finally found an outlet, and the whole farce that Perlita had been building for years in front of the silent Nestor and the feignedly calm Durant began to crumble, break, disintegrate under its own weight. About 20 minutes after the first couple of inquirers disappeared around the corner, I saw Perlita in the backyard, pacing with long, nervous strides and almost hissing into her phone, as if her voice was about to set the air around her on fire. She was calling Justina, our watchful neighbor, the one who always looked out the window at every unfamiliar car, as if she were guarding a strategically important facility and not a backwater street with identical lawns. Perlita, her voice shaking with indignation, warned Justina to watch the strangers, because, according to her, her crazy daughter-in-law, that is, me, was allegedly trying to rent out their house, and not figuratively, but literally. I heard Justina even from across the yard, her loud, surprised voice, sounding as unashamed as always. "You mean your house? The one with the new garden furniture?" I just saw some people approaching the door. They were taking pictures, by the way. At these words, Perlita seemed to be speechless, frozen in place, and then uttered a single, tense, "What?" as if she had heard a sentence. Justina, without waiting for an invitation, continued, "Yes, I thought maybe you sent them yourself. You didn't do it?" At that moment, Perlita took off and literally flew into the house, as if the very thought of strangers on her marble steps was a violation of the sanctity of her aesthetic sanctuary. "They're already there," she hissed, stopping in front of Nestor, who already looked like he was about to pass out from the stress. "In the house," she added. He looked from her to me with difficulty, as if hoping this was all a prank, but when he saw my calm gaze, he realized it was real. "Justina says people are walking in the backyard," Perlita added, and that was too much. Nestor lost control completely. "We have to go now," he blurted, and in 10 minutes they had packed faster than they had ever done in all the years they'd been visiting, so much so that I wondered if Perlita had forgotten in her rush to bring her precious organic granola, which she talked about every Saturday like it was a cure-all. Durant remained sitting on the couch, and when I asked, still watching the commotion, "You're not coming?" he shrugged and replied nonchalantly, "No, let them do it." I almost believed that this would be the end of it, that the awkwardness had passed, but less than an hour later I received a text from one of the people I'd sent instructions to inspect the house. "Hey, just a heads up, 2 old people ran out into the driveway yelling at us to leave. One of them said she was calling the police. We thought it was all legal." Boops. I quickly replied, sorry for the mix-up. Must have been a double booking. It seemed like a stupid mistake, unless you knew it had been planned down to the last detail. Then Justina called. Her voice was worried but firm. Isabella, I don't want to scare you, but I saw Perlita arguing with some people, and now there's a police car outside their house. Yes. Perlita had actually called the police to her house because of the 4 people I'd invited to the screening. Durant and I sat in silence, staring at the wall, as if trying to process how our reality had become this farce, this crazy combination of social drama, everyday absurdity, and bizarre comedy of manners. The messages kept coming, one after another, like an endless stream of updates from an alternate universe in which I was, it turned out, a criminal. Justina texted again. Perlita is talking to an officer outside. Nestor is pacing the yard. This is wild. They're saying someone hacked their address and posted it online. Oh, now I'm a hacker, I thought with a dry smile. Meanwhile, people in the Facebook group where I posted the listing started messaging me, asking why the police were getting involved at the open house. Then something unexpected happened. I got a message from Duran's cousin, Ronaldo, the one who lived a few streets away and rarely got involved in anything. He sent me a screenshot of Perlita's Facebook post, a long, hysterical rant, written in all caps, like a scream into the void. If anyone sees a post stating our house is for rent, it's a scam. Someone is trying to take opportunity on us. Don't trust Isabella. She's sick. Durant read the post over my shoulder, slowly, as if deciphering the text in an unfamiliar language, and then quietly said, wow. Things have gotten worse. But the most surprising thing began in the comments. People who had once liked Perlita began asking questions, politely but persistently. Wait, why are you never home on weekends? Don't you stay with Durant and Isabella every Friday? Are you okay? Do you need a place to stay? And these questions were not mockery, but mistrust, doubt, the very crack that appears when a person begins to realize that the picture of the world that has been painted for so long has actually faded long ago. Perlita, of course, couldn't help herself. Her response to one of the comments was classic Perlita, yeah. We spend time at our son's house to make sure everything is done right. And that was the catalyst. The responses came pouring in, sharp, caustic, and humorous, but the gist of them was frighteningly simple. Why are you babysitting adults? It's weird, Perlita. And in that torrent of reproach and sarcasm, I felt more than just gloating, I felt justice. It was nice to see her finally being put in her place, the illusion of control crumbling before the eyes of everyone who had previously believed in her. But I wasn't going to stop there. Putting their house up for sale wasn't just a joke, it was a test. And depending on how they handled it, I already had the second part of the plan ready. While Perlita posted her story online, growing more heated with each comment, as if she were trying to convince herself rather than others, I remained silent. I didn't defend myself, didn't edit, didn't delete the post or any traces of my involvement. I just let it all flow, watching as the words turned into hot coals, burning away her carefully constructed image of a reasonable, prudent, caring mother of a family. The comments flowed like a river. With each new clarification from Perlita, everything looked worse. Her attempts to justify why she and Nestor spent every weekend with us sounded not like an act of goodwill, but like a confession of pathological obsession, and no one reading it wanted to believe that adults were simply helping by taking away personal space, without asking permission, and invading someone else's everyday life with the regularity of a ritual. Then Ronaldo messaged me again, his message short and surprised. Hey, did you know someone actually submitted an application to rent their house? At first I thought he was joking, but when I clicked on the link and looked at the notifications, I realized that no, someone had actually taken the listing seriously and sent a full application with all the documents attached, including a background check, credit history, and letters of recommendation. People weren't just asking, they wanted to live in the house. They imagined themselves in those perfect rooms where Perlita proudly showed off the tile. They dreamed of cooking in the kitchen that she considered the standard. And that gave them new thoughts. Very specific ones. Perlita and Nestor's house was located in one of those communities with excessive, almost absurd self-control, where the color of the facade must match an approved palette, the length of the grass is measured with a ruler, and the height of the mailbox is a subject of discussion at monthly meetings. I knew for a fact that short-term rentals were prohibited by the HOA bylaws, and that doing so carried a fine of $5,000 and a formal warning that could lead to more serious consequences, including a lawsuit. So I forwarded the same ad to their board, with a short, polite, neutral note: "Hello. Just wanted to let you know that this house appears to be available for short-term rental. Saw people come in to look at it. Thought you might be interested. Have a nice day." No signature, no number, just a flick of the match to light the fuse. That evening, Nestor called Durant, and I heard it all because Durant, without saying a word, put the phone on speakerphone. Nestor sounded tired, irritated, but no longer in the smug tone I was used to, but with obvious concern. "Tell your wife to delete everything she posted online. The HOA just called. They're threatening to arrest us over some rental-related nonsense. This has gone too far." Durant, still staring at the screen without looking up, said calmly, "Yeah, I don't know, Dad. Sounds like you and Mom might need to keep an eye on this." I almost laughed. It was the first time he'd dared to ask a direct question, the first time he'd taken a side instead of the endless, "Just let it happen." Mine. But that wasn't all. Guess who else found out about this situation? The local news. One of the Facebook group admins had reached out to us via private message to say that a local reporter had been interested in the story as an example of community rule violations, since the HOA had recently instituted new measures against illegal short-term rentals, and they now suspected that the Perlita family might be part of a systemic problem. I neither confirmed nor denied. "Wow," I said. "Yes, I heard there was some activity there." Nothing more. Perlita and Nestor spent the next week in a state of panic. Their anxiety permeated everything from their text messages to the expressions on their faces in the rare photos they posted, out of habit. They had to show up in person at the HOA office, where, as Durant later told me, they were asked to sign a written statement declaring that they were not in the rental business and that the incident had been a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a circle of family issues began to form around them like a slowly tightening ring. I got a call from Nestor's sister, who usually kept to herself and never interfered. "Isabella, what's going on?" she asked, stifling a laugh. "Perlita said you were trying to rent out their house. Is that true? Why would you do that?" I paused, then calmly replied, "They're never there on the weekends, and I figured they could use the extra money." She laughed out loud. "That's actually funny. Honestly, maybe you should rent it out. They don't even live there anymore." But then she dropped the bomb. "They're planning on moving in with you permanently soon. Didn't Durant tell you?" I almost dropped the phone. "Excuse me?" I whispered, not believing my ears. "Yes," she said, "they've been talking for months about how they were getting too old to take care of their house. Spending every weekend with you was kind of a trial run for them. Nestor mentioned putting the house on the market this year." I froze. I stared at the empty wall of my living room where they'd sat like they already owned it, like they'd already moved in. This whole weekend had been just the beginning. They'd been scouting out the place, testing the waters to move in permanently, and they'd never said a word to me or Durant. I hung up and just sat there in the chair by the window, watching the soft light creep across the floor, watching the shadows move from the branches of the old maple outside, and feeling something heavy and hot and wordless growing in my chest. Not anger, not fear, not even amazement, but that point when everything fits together into a clear picture and you can no longer pretend not to see it. Durant came in, frowning slightly, and, as if out of habit, asked warily what had happened. I repeated it to him, word for word, as his aunt had told me, and when I had finished, he merely shrugged, as if he had heard not the news that his parents had decided to move in with us permanently without the slightest consultation, but a weather forecast. "I mean, maybe," he said, as if there was nothing final about it. "They were hinting at it." "Hinting?" I repeated, not believing that he seriously considered regular arrivals with suitcases, as if on schedule, a hint. Is that what we now call the occupation of someone else's life, a hint? Then I realized that just one rental ad, one joke, however subtly planned, was not enough. This was more than a fight for my weekends. More than annoyance at their criticism or invasion of the space where I wanted to feel at home, it became a question of my sanity, my independence, my identity in this marriage. They had not simply violated the boundaries. They had burned the map by which these boundaries could be restored. So I turned on the next level, calmly, without emotion, like a surgeon preparing for a difficult but necessary operation. I called the realtor Perlita raved about in every conversation, Megan, the one who sold her friend's house in 3 days without even posting an ad. I introduced myself, explained that I needed a professional appraisal of their house, just for information, and if she could bring along a big, bright for sale sign to see how it looked in the front yard, just visually, nothing serious. That Saturday, everything went like clockwork. Perlita and Nestor showed up at 4:07, as always, with the same smug expression, the same rolling suitcase, the same words, "We're just here to make sure everything goes right." But this time I didn't open the door, Durant did, and I saw him linger in the hallway, as if gathering his courage before letting them in. Everything was prepared. As I had planned, Perlita, before she had even reached the middle of the living room, froze in place, as if she had stumbled upon a ghost. There was a sign on the kitchen counter, white plastic with bold red letters slanted toward the entrance so it would stand out. "What's that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Oh, the realtor came by," I answered calmly. "Just wanted to get a head start on listing your house. Just a little favor since you're rarely home." Nestor frowned, blinked. "Listing? What listing?" I answered with the same calm confidence. "Your house. I figured since you spend so much time here, maybe we should make it official. If we're going to sell, we'll sell it." Perlita went pale. "What did you do?" she gasped, and at that moment, Durant, bless him, finally spoke. "Yeah, Mom. You already live here, basically. Isabella just helped you get ahead. That's all." It was like a blow, unexpected, sharp, but impossibly accurate. Perlita flared up. "You have no right," she screamed. "This is our family. We're trying to support you, and this is what you do to us? Make fun of us? Embarrass us in front of the whole neighborhood?" Nestor shook his head. "That's not funny. You've crossed the line." And as if on cue, there was a knock at the door. It was Ronaldo, just happened to be in the area, he said, but we both knew he was there for a front row seat to the family drama. He walked in, looked around, saw the sign, and laughed. "Wow. You guys are really selling. I thought this was all a joke." Perlita rushed to him as if to a life preserver. "It's a joke. A very bad joke." Ronaldo shrugged. "You could have fooled me. Justina's been telling half the block that you're renting out the house. I think it's time to sell." And then, right there in my living room, Perlita broke down. She started crying, loudly, ugly, desperately, like someone who no longer knows what to say. "This is our family," she sobbed. "We were just trying to help. We supported you, and now everyone thinks that we are what? Homeless? Fraudsters? Do you have any idea how awkward this is?" Nestor was silent, looking at the floor, as if he had run out of words, and Durant rubbed his temples and said nothing, as if he was tired of being a mediator in a conflict that had long since gone beyond the bounds of common sense. And me? I finally told the truth. "No, Perlita. You weren't helping. You were intruding. You came over every weekend without asking, criticized everything I did, created an atmosphere in which I did not feel like the mistress of my own home, and never once asked if it was convenient for us. You just decided that your place was here." She opened her mouth to argue, as if she were taking a deep breath for another round of accusations or complaints, but I did not give her a chance, because I felt that if I did not tell her everything now, I would never be able to breathe calmly or look in the mirror without a sense of betrayal. "And now it turns out," I said, "that you were going to move in with me permanently behind my back, as if I would not notice, as if I had no right to a voice in my own home, in my own life." Her face distorted, a mixture of incomprehension, wounded pride, and something else, perhaps resentment, perhaps fear. "We thought you would be grateful," she managed to say, as if it were an obvious truth, and then Durant spoke, quietly, reservedly, but firmly, "Mama, let's go." What must she have felt? "You haven't even spoken to us about this." There was a strange, dense silence, in which every look was heavier than words, and suddenly, unexpectedly even for himself, Nestor looked up and said, "Perhaps we overdid it." Perlita turned sharply, shock in her voice. "I beg your pardon." But he did not back down. "You heard me. Perhaps we pressed too hard. Perhaps we stayed too long." These were the first honest words the man had spoken in years, and I think they broke something in Perlita, because she didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't throw up her hands as usual. She just stood there, her expression bewildered, and then turned, grabbed her suitcase, and walked out without another word. Nestor followed her without being asked, and Ronaldo stayed where he was, waited for the door to close behind them, and then, grinning, said, "Well, that was something." We didn't see or hear from them for 2 weeks. No surprise visits, no inspections, no sudden marches through the kitchen with critical remarks. Durant spent most of those days wandering around the house as if he were lost, stopping in doorways, lost in the middle of the room, as if searching for a trace of their presence or absence. "Do you think they're done with us?" he asked one day. I shrugged. "I think," I said, "they're finally realizing they can't control everything." And honestly, what I felt wasn't guilt or sadness, but relief, strange, sharp, liberating. That weight that had been on my chest every weekend, that gray pall over every Friday, was gone, as if it had never been there. But Durant was thrashing about. "They're my parents," he kept saying. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Meanwhile, Ronaldo continued to give us good news. Perlita was apparently still complaining on Facebook, writing long posts about a broken family, a disgraced reputation, a sister-in-law who had turned them into the talk of the quarterly meeting. And Justina, wise, forthright Justina, wrote to me one evening, "Honestly, Isabella, you're great. We've all wondered why they were never home. You said what no one else dared to say." A month later, we finally met them on neutral ground, at Aunt Susan's, where the atmosphere required politeness. This time, Perlita was quieter, more reserved, although you could tell from her eyes that she had no intention of apologizing. She called the whole thing a misunderstanding, as if a series of actions that went on for years could be accidental. Nestor, at least, lowered his head and said, "We thought we were helping. We should have asked first." Durant looked them in the face and, without hesitation, said, "We need space. If you can't respect that, we can't keep doing this." They nodded. Sort of in agreement. From then on, they started texting before they came over. And they didn't stay overnight anymore. It's not perfect. Perlita still makes passive-aggressive comments our way, especially when it comes to food or cleaning. But the weekends are ours again. And every now and then, when I drive by their house, I can't help but smile because the "for sale" sign is still leaning against the garage. They never put it out on the lawn, but they never brought it inside either. Maybe, just maybe, they've finally started thinking about where they belong. And that place isn't my living room. Leave a comment below telling me what you think of this story, and don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. See you soon.